Today, you will hear 3 true stories. Each one begins with an ordinary setting, an ordinary people, and each one ends with a question so unsettling it has never been answered. This is the story of a family who left their home for a simple trip and were never seen alive again. For weeks, their whereabouts were a mystery. The only clue left behind was found inside their abandoned truck, and it would deepen the unease for years to come. The setting is rural Oklahoma in October 2009. Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison were a family facing challenges but bound by deep love. Bobby worked as a handyman, while Sherilyn was studying to become a nurse. They lived in a modest home near the small community of Eufaula, a place of quiet, open landscapes and dense woodlands. The family was in the process of buying a plot of land in the nearby San Boy Mountains, a place they dreamed of calling their own. On October 8th, a Thursday, they decided to take a drive to look at the property once more. They packed some snacks, loaded their 2 dogs into their pickup truck, and told a relative they would be back that same evening. It was a short 40-minute trip they had made before. As evening fell, the family did not return. Their cell phones went straight to voicemail. Concern began to grow among relatives when night descended, and there was still no word. The trip to the mountains was straightforward, and the Jamisons were not the type to disappear without a trace. A subtle, nagging worry began to replace the initial assumption of a simple delay. The following morning, with still no sign of the Jamisons, the search began. Authorities and volunteers combed the roads between their home and the mountain property. Just after 11 a.m., a sheriff's deputy made a discovery. The family's red pickup truck was found parked on a remote dead-end Forest Service road deep in the mountains, miles from their intended destination. The engine was cold, the doors were unlocked. Inside the truck, the scene was orderly but profoundly wrong. The family's 2 dogs were inside, alive but weak from hunger and thirst. The Jamisons' wallets, IDs, cash, and cell phones were all left behind. Sherilyn's purse sat on the seat. A car seat for Madison was empty. There was no sign of a struggle, no broken glass, and no immediate evidence of what had happened to the 3 people who had been inside. The most chilling discovery, however, was a collection of photographs on Bobby's phone. They were self-portraits, taken in the hours after the truck was presumed to have stopped. The Jamisons' faces showed no panic, but their expressions were described as blank, detached, and eerily vacant. In one, they appeared to be staring directly at the camera with empty, unseeing eyes. It was as if the spark of the people they were had been abruptly extinguished. Also left in the truck were 2 handguns, fully loaded. Bobby was a licensed carrier, so their presence wasn't unusual, but their placement alongside the personal items deepened the mystery. Why would an armed family simply abandon their vehicle, their money, their phones, and their beloved pets in such a remote location? The logical explanations were beginning to fray at the edges. An extensive ground and air search was launched across the rugged terrain. Days turned into weeks. Searchers found no footprints leading away from the truck, no discarded clothing, and no evidence of the family's path. It was as if Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison had stepped out of the vehicle and simply vaporized into the cold mountain air. The isolation of the spot was absolute, the silence oppressive. The investigation revealed complexities in the family's life. They had been involved in a contentious custody battle with Sherilyn's parents over Madison. There were also whispers of financial strain and marital stress. Most unsettlingly, friends reported that Sherilyn had recently expressed a profound and somewhat vague fear of someone unspecified. She believed this person meant to harm her family, but she never gave a name. Theories swirled, but evidence was absent. Had they encountered foul play? Had they voluntarily walked away, staging their own disappearance? The latter seemed implausible given the abandoned child's seat and pets. Could a shared psychological break have occurred, leading them to wander into the wilderness? The blank expressions in those final photos haunted this theory. The case grew cold, a painful open wound for the community. For nearly 3 years, the mountains kept their secret. Then, in November 2012, a hunter scouting a different, steep, and heavily wooded area of the same range stumbled upon a grim sight. Scattered on the forest floor were human remains. They were located over 10 miles from where the truck had been found, in terrain so difficult it had been missed by previous searches. Dental records confirmed the identities: Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison Jamison. The discovery provided closure to the question of their fate, but none to the mystery of its cause. The medical examiner could not determine a definitive cause of death for any of them. The time and the elements had taken too great a toll. There were no bullet wounds, no obvious signs of blunt force trauma on the recovered bones. They had simply perished together in that remote stretch of wilderness. With no cause of death and no suspects, there was no trial. The case remains officially unsolved. No one has ever been charged in connection with the disappearance and deaths of the Jamison family. The district attorney stated that without evidence of foul play, the case would likely remain closed, a permanent question mark in the files. Today, the questions persist. What happened in the hours between the last photograph and their deaths? What led them to drive to that specific isolated dead end? Did an external threat find them, or did something internal unravel? The blank stares from the phone remain the family's only testimony. They offer no answers, only a silent, unsettling testament to a mystery that vanished into the Oklahoma woods, never to fully emerge. The second story began with a phone call in which a man calmly reported a dead body. His tone was so indifferent that the operator first thought it was a prank, but by the end of that call, when police arrived at the address given, it became clear the man on the other end of the line had just described the circumstances of his own murder. This happened in a quiet suburb of Sacramento, California, in the early morning of November 4th, 1996. Raymond Gates was a 58-year-old man living an ordinary, unremarkable life. He worked as an engineer, was divorced, and lived alone in his tidy house on a quiet street. His neighbors described him as a quiet, private man who always mowed his lawn on time. Around 6:30 a.m., a 911 operator received a call. The male caller introduced himself as Ray. His voice was flat, almost monotonous, devoid of any urgency or emotion. He said there was a dead body in a house on McKinley Avenue. The operator, alarmed by such unnatural calmness, began asking standard questions, trying to determine if this was a real emergency or a failed prank. The operator asked if the person was breathing. Ray replied, "No, not breathing." When asked how he knew the person was dead, he said simply, "Because it's me." There was no panic or fear in his voice, only a strange, chilling statement of fact. The operator, still trying to process the meaning, asked if he was injured. Ray confirmed, "Yes, I have a gunshot wound." The dialogue became even more surreal. The operator, now understanding he was speaking to a dying man, tried to ascertain his exact location in the house and keep him on the line. Ray gave the address, his own. He said he was lying on the kitchen floor. When asked who shot him, he replied with the same chilling detachment, "It was someone else." But he refused to give a name or describe the attacker. Ray began to speak more quietly. He told the operator he was losing consciousness. His breathing became labored and raspy. The operator insistently asked him to stay awake, saying help was on the way. Ray's last words were not about help, pain, or fear. He simply said, "They took my wallet." Then the connection cut off. Only complete silence remained on the line. Police arrived at McKinley Avenue within minutes. The front door was locked. Officers broke it down. Inside, there was complete silence. The house showed no signs of a struggle or disorder. Everything was in its place, neat and clean, as if nothing terrible had happened. The contrast between the ordinariness of the setting and the horror of the phone call was deafening. They found Raymond Gates exactly where he said he would be, on the kitchen floor. He was lying on his back. There was no weapon nearby. His wallet was indeed missing. The scene did not indicate a burglary. Nothing was scattered. Drawers were not pulled out. It looked as if someone had entered, performed a single action, and left, leaving the house in its pristine, unnatural order. The investigation immediately hit a paradox. Raymond Gates was killed by a close-range gunshot to the chest. However, there were no gunpowder residue on his hands, ruling out suicide. It was unequivocally a homicide, but the motive remained completely unclear. He was not involved in criminal activity. He had no known enemies. His finances were stable, but there were no large sums worth killing for. the 911 call recording became the central piece of evidence and the main mystery. Forensic experts and psychologists studied it. Raymond's calm, almost detached tone did not match the typical reactions of a victim of severe violence. He did not scream, cry, or beg for help. He simply stated facts like a detached observer. This raised the question, was this a manifestation of shock, or did his composure hide some kind of knowledge? Investigators checked all possible connections. His ex-wife had an alibi. His co-workers could not suggest any conflict. Neighbors did not see any suspicious persons or vehicles that morning. The only physical clue, the missing wallet, seemed too obvious, almost deliberate, as if it was taken to steer the investigation towards a false lead of robbery, which did not seem plausible. Despite years of investigation, Raymond Gates's murderer was never found. No arrests were made, no trials. The case remains open but unsolved. The killer, who made his victim call 911 and so coldly describe his own death, simply vanished into that November morning, taking with him the motive and the full understanding of what truly happened in that kitchen. The third story is one that begins as a detective story and ends as a nightmare. A young woman vanished in the heart of a bustling city inside a building monitored by cameras. The only clue is the last footage of her, and it is so strange it has spawned more questions than answers. Her name was Elisa Lam. Los Angeles, January 2013. 21-year-old Elisa Lam, a student from Canada, embarked on a solo trip down the West Coast. She was intelligent, creative, and maintained a popular travel blog. Like many young travelers, she checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown LA, a place with low rates and a history richer and darker than its modest facade suggested. She was last seen alive on January 31st. She was due to check out and travel to San Diego, but never appeared at the front desk. Her belongings remained in her room. At first, hotel staff assumed she had simply been delayed. But when days passed and her family in Canada couldn't reach her, a missing persons report was filed with the LAPD. Investigators began a standard review. They interviewed staff and other guests, checked security footage from the lobby and elevators. It was here they found what would forever define the case. On elevator camera footage from the late evening of January 31st, Elisa was captured, but her behavior was inexplicable. The elevator wasn't operating normally, and she certainly wasn't. In the 4-minute video, Elisa enters the frame and presses buttons on the elevator panel. The doors close, but almost immediately reopen. She appears wary. She peeks her head out into the hallway, looking left and right. She retreats, pressing herself against the far wall of the elevator. Her movements are jerky, anxious. She appears to be talking to herself or to someone just out of frame. Then, her gestures become increasingly bizarre. She stretches out her arms, as if pointing at something or warding off an unseen threat. She weaves her fingers into complex, almost ritualistic patterns. She steps out into the hallway again, disappears from view for a moment, then returns to the elevator. The doors still won't close. She presses the buttons again, but nothing seems to happen. Her expression flickers between fear, confusion, and concentration. Finally, she leaves the elevator and turns right into the dark hallway. The elevator doors remain open. A few moments later, they close and the elevator begins to move, as if summoned from another floor. The camera captured the last known moments of her life. No one else was seen on the footage or in the elevator, and yet she was clearly reacting to something. Police released the footage, hoping the public could help identify or understand her behavior. It instantly went viral. Millions dissected every frame. Theories proliferated, from paranormal activity and abduction to possible substance influence. But no theory explained where she had vanished inside a functioning hotel in the middle of a city. Searches of the hotel and surrounding area yielded nothing. Over 2 weeks passed. Then, on February 19th, several hotel guests began complaining of low water pressure and a strange taste to the tap water. A maintenance worker went to the roof to inspect the 4 massive cylindrical water tanks supplying the hotel. Approaching one of the hatch openings, he noticed something inside. The body of Elisa Lam was found inside one of the water tanks. She was naked. Her clothing and personal effects floated nearby. The hatch lid through which she could have entered was closed. Reaching this spot required climbing a tall external ladder, traversing an open section of roof, and opening a heavy hatch. How did she get there, and why? The official investigation concluded with an accidental death. The coroner's report noted that Elisa suffered from bipolar disorder. It was theorized she experienced a psychotic episode that led her to the roof and into the tank, where she drowned. Her death was ruled an accidental drowning. No charges of foul play or negligence were filed. The case was closed. But a closed case did not stop the questions. How did she close the heavy hatch behind her from the inside? Why did the roof alarm not trigger? Did her elevator behavior match known symptoms of her condition? Or was it prompted by something or someone else? The Cecil Hotel has been remodeled, but the mystery remains. It lives in that 4-minute video, in a looped moment of time where a young woman speaks to an emptiness that seems to speak back.